One of the things that was very confusing to me when I started crocheting was understanding the difference in yarn. So I thought I would like to explain about different types of yarn, and there's just so much to say. I even have a written guide so that I don't get mixed up. Starting off with materials, yarn can come in so many different materials. You can have yarn made of 100% wool, and then you have different types of wool, for example merino wool, and you can have yarn that's made out of cotton, for example this one, it's 100% cotton. You can have yarn that's made out of bamboo, cashmere, alpaca yarn, yarn that's mixed with silk, and so on, and those would be all natural fibers. And then you also have man-made fibers, which tend to be more budget friendly. In that case, we have acrylic. This is an acrylic yarn, and so is this one, and pretty much all the ones I'm going to show you, except for the cotton ones. And you also have acrylic and nylon mixes, which makes it quite soft, and that's frequently seen in baby yarn because it tends to be softer for babies. And different fibers have different purposes. So if I want to make a summer top, I'm not really going to use acrylic or wool because that's going to be very warm. So cotton might be a good option, because like a cotton t-shirt, it's going to be more breathable. And for amigurumi also, I tend to prefer cotton because I think it gives your stitch more definition and it also looks prettier in my opinion. However, I have used acrylic a lot for amigurumi, especially because it's more budget friendly, and when I was learning I just didn't want to invest too much in yarn. So I have a big stash of acrylic yarn and I'm working through that and slowly replacing it with cotton yarn. In my last video, when I was teaching you how to chain, I was using this cotton yarn by Schipjes. And my Dutch friends, please forgive me, I find this brand very hard to pronounce. This is what I was using, Schipjes Calista. And you can see how even the same fiber can have a very different appearance depending on brand, and even if it's mercerized or non-mercerized. Mercerized cotton tends to be shinier than non-mercerized. This is gassed cotton, which makes it look almost fluffier in a way, but that's not quite the word I want. And you also have yarn mixes. This is an example of a yarn mix. The pink in this is cotton, whereas the blue is acrylic. So this yarn is 70% cotton, 30% acrylic, and this one's very nice. I really like it for amigurumi. I'm making a big amigurumi with this particular yarn, and it's coming out really nice. And your other popular mixes are bamboo and wool, bamboo and cotton, acrylic and wool, and cashmere and silk. And another fiber I forgot to mention is polyester. This is a polyester yarn. It's extremely soft. It feels like a soft blanket. However, I haven't been very lucky making amigurumi with this. I think I have to improve my technique. Some people can make a lovely amigurumi with this. I just haven't found the right technique for it yet, but I'll keep trying. And now you may have seen the yarns have varying thicknesses, and I want to talk about that next. Let me just flip over my notes here. The thickness in a yarn is called weight. And again, there are different terms for the US, for the UK, and for Australia. I'm going to put up a chart with the different names, but I'm going to be using the UK names and the US names that I know. So the finest yarn you have is 1-ply in the US or lace in the UK. Unfortunately I don't have any of that to show you, but it's really, really, really fine. And then you have 2-ply or fingering, 3-ply or sock yarn, and 4-ply or sport yarn. That's the finest I actually have. This is sport yarn. It's very tiny, but it says here sport. And I'm going to show you how fine this is. It's not super, super fine. Not like fingering or anything like that. But out of the ones I have, it's the thinnest one. And after sport, you'd have DK, which is double knit, also called light worsted in the UK or US. Oh goodness, I'm all mixed up with my terms because I learned watching YouTube videos and I watched both American and British videos, so I'm pretty mixed up with my terms, so please excuse me. And then in the UK you also have Caron, which is known as worsted in the US. And this is an example of Caron or worsted. And I thought this would be a nice example because it's exactly the same yarn, just in different weights. So this would be 2 steps up. So here you have sport or 4-ply, and then I'm going to pull out some double knit yarn so you can see what that looks like. This is a different type of yarn in double knit. So you can see how it's thicker than that. And so here we have 4-ply or sport, DK or light worsted, Caron or worsted, and the next one is chunky. And chunky or bulky in the US. This one's chunky. And here you can see how this one here is a bit tricky because it's got the fuzzy bit, so it looks a bit thicker. However, this one is also chunky, and it's significantly chunkier than that one. Oh, it's not in frame. And then you also have super chunky. However, I don't have any super chunky to show you, sorry. Here, let me lay the chunky out now in frame. Sorry about that. It's very hard to film yourself. And I don't feel like recording again because this is like the 4th time I do this. So this would be the chunky, but in a completely different fiber. And you can see how it's quite a bit thicker than that. So how do you know what the weight of your yarn is? The easiest way is to read the label. So I thought I'd read a few labels with you to help you get the knack of reading a label. So here, this is Paintbox Yarns. You can get it from lovecrafts.com. And here it says Simply Chunky. That's the name of the line, but it says it's chunky. If you flip it over, it's going to give you what it's made of, so 100% acrylic. And then you have it here in different translations. It also tells you that it's a level 5 or bulky, so if you're in America, you know it's bulky. And this is quite an important bit. It tells you what hook size to use. This was a doubt I had when I was learning, because there are lots of hook sizes, and how do I know what hook to use with what yarn? So frequently you'll just have the knitting needles and the size. I think that's prejudice against crocheters, but oh well. Thankfully, this brand puts a crochet hook also, so thank you, Paintbox Yarns. Here they suggest a 6mm hook or a 10 USA hook or a 4 UK hook. I normally just use millimeters, And in this case, they suggest a 6mm hook. This is my 6mm hook, so they suggest this size of hook for this yarn. And using this size of hook for this yarn, if you crochet 14 stitches for 20 rows, you should get 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. And this is called your gauge. And this is important if you're making any garment or anything that requires a specific size. So if you're making a top or a hat or something that has to fit, then you should always check your gauge. And your gauge is always going to be indicated on the label. So in this case, you should do 14 stitches across and then crochet for 20 stitches up. And when you measure it with your ruler or with your measuring tape, you should get 10 centimeters or 4 inches this way and that way. It also gives you washing instructions. So this label is particularly kind and it writes what each symbol means. Other labels don't write what each symbol means. Other labels like this one just have the symbols, but you can always look them up online. I printed something out from the internet and I just put it in the utility room so that I don't ruin any of my clothes. So you can just look for something up online, what do the laundry symbols mean, and print it out, and that way you won't ruin any of your yarn or finished projects when you're done. And let's have a look at this other label. So this one says it's Caron. It's the River Washed XL. This here doesn't really tell you what size it is other than it's not the regular River Washed, which is this one. And by the way, this is the mini version. I got it in a lovely kit that a friend gave me. Let me just get it back in because it's so adorable. So they have the regular River Washed, which is the sport weight, and they have the River Washed XL, which is an Caron weight. And here they have a knitting needle and a crochet hook, and they recommend a size 5 millimeters, which would be this size. And for the gauge, 19 stitches, 19 rows up, 14 stitches across, and you should get 10 by 10 centimeters or 4 by 4 inches. So you can see it's a little bit more cryptic, and you have to know that this is the gauge. In this label, it was a little bit clearer. So that's why I'm going through a few different labels with you. And here you have the washing and care instructions and the composition. One other thing I forgot to mention is a color and dye lot. This can make a big difference depending on what you're making. So say you're making a jumper or a sweater and you have yarn from different dye lots. Different dye lots can have slightly different colors, and you can get some odd results if the colors aren't exactly the same. So if you're buying yarn for a big project, make sure you get enough and make sure you get it all from the same dye lot. There are some websites like Wool Warehouse that will let you choose the dye lot, and that's really nice, and you can choose the same dye lot as what you already have. So this one is 8011 and this one here is 8116. You can see it's the same color, 981. Oh, this one's actually 941. Interesting. That's Colorado and Colorado. So let's get another label. This is Caron Simply Soft. Again, another type of acrylic, and you can see how even different types of acrylic look quite different. And this one here, you can see the strands and they're kind of twisted. And this one here, you can see them, but they're not quite as obvious. So here it says it's a medium yarn. no dye lots, so that's a nice thing. You don't have to worry about that with this yarn. For your gauge, use a 5mm hook, do 13 single crochets across by 14 rows, and it should be 10 by 10 centimeters or 4 by 4 inches. And here you have your washing instructions. And I'm just looking for the weight on this one. I know it's an Caron. Well, I guess I'd go by this one saying it's a number 4 or medium, but I guess it doesn't say Caron or worsted anywhere on it. Interesting. And if it doesn't say, if it doesn't give you the name of the weight, you can always guess based on the hook size. With time, you'll figure that out and you'll get to know that a 5mm hook is normally Caron or worsted weight. And so now you know what size of hook to choose based on what yarn you have. However, depending on the project, your pattern might call for a slightly bigger or smaller hook. So I made a blanket once and it called for DK yarn, which would be this thickness. And this one recommends a 4mm hook. However, the project called for a 5mm hook so that the blanket would be very drapey. So always pay attention to your pattern. And if you're making amigurumi, and just to be clear, amigurumi are the crochet toys or little creatures such as this one. If you're doing this, you want your stitches to be tight so that you don't get any of the stuffing poking through. So in this case, I always recommend going down at least 0.5 millimeter in size. So if I were doing an amigurumi with DK, instead of using a 4mm hook as is suggested here, I'd probably go for a 3.5, maybe even a 3. I'd do a bit and see if it looks kind of holy and decide, okay? And now I'm going to, I think I'm going to stop this video here. It's incredibly long, and I'll do another video, a separate video on hooks. I hope you like this.